Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'll be talking about the 29th update for Scorn. Truth be told, there isn't too much new to go over. There's no big revelations about gameplay or the lore, but that does not mean that there's nothing to talk about in relation to Scorn in general. One of the first clips shown is of Scorn guy trying to shoot one of these floppy bastards, getting one hit, running out of ammo, and desperately trying to reload while moving backwards. The big takeaway from it is that the reload animation is significantly faster than what it used to be. Likely a quality of life change because having to watch that long animation, especially in instances where there is no danger, can get very old very fast, especially for players who would rather have their pistol loaded fully at as many instances that they can, as opposed to just running in with just one shot. What were you doing before then? Another clip shows a finishing animation on one of the bears, showing that yes, you can use this tool against them as well. It was confirmed in the update that not only is this the first weapon you get, but it is also the only melee weapon you get. In any case, that makes one more creature killing animation that we've seen, the other involving the Kiwi. Interestingly, Peklar has stated that the tool can overheat if used too much. We haven't seen that in any of the footage so far, though the instances that it is used has been spread apart quite a bit, but it does show you can't just go around stabbing random fleshy creatures with it all day long. There might actually be a point in which you have to run away. And running away is an interesting thought, because in the update Peklar calls these weapons, quote, optional tools for progression, end quote. And in a previous post where there was a clip of Scorn guy blasting one of the floppy bastards' faces off with a shotgun, he also emphasized the idea of having multiple different ways to progress. This is interesting because we really haven't seen that in any of the gameplay footage. Yes, there is the option to run away, but it does genuinely seem like a lot of the creatures and scenarios are hard roadblocks to progression. Maybe you can get lucky enough and run away without taking any damage, but it does seem like as you go through these different corridors, there is going to be a creature in front of you, and the best and fastest and quickest way to get rid of the roadblock is to just shoot it. Given the idea of the game being this sprawling, interconnected world, it is entirely possible that there are different routes in different areas that one could take that would lead the player to running into less creatures. Or perhaps there is some tool or game mechanic that we just have not seen yet that offers an alternative when dealing with these things. After all, presumably there are more weapons than the 4 we've seen so far, though none of them have been introduced in the update. It could be that there's even a tool that freezes these things. I mean, at the end of the day, all we really know is that there's nothing else you can use to whack these various creatures. And yeah, that's all I really have to say about the update at hand. It's a very self-evident update that really doesn't require me to expand on anything said in it. That being said, there are some things I would like to talk about in relation to Scorn. Even though one of the previous updates has talked about puzzles, I am very interested in how those would be intertwined into the game's lore. The idea being that this was supposed to be a living, breathing world with its citizens going about their day-to-day lives. How did it function, and did the puzzles actually play a role in their lives? As a point of comparison, I'm going to use the Scorn fan Discord's favorite meme game, Poppy Playtime. Now, even though I've played the first chapter because it was free, most of the clips will actually be from chapter 2 because they do better at visualizing what I'm talking about. Though I have not played chapter 2 myself, I'm not spending $10 on fucking Poppy Playtime. Others have and have recorded their gameplay, and the footage I'll be using is from a YouTuber by the name of Super Horror Bro, link in the description. The primary gimmick of the game Poppy Playtime is based on this tool called the Grab Pack. It's a set of hands that allows a player to interact with the world around him. They're able to open doors, they're able to grab objects from afar, and you can even use them to slap the tiny Huggy Wuggies in one of the minigame areas. But the majority use for the Grab Pack is based on rerouting power. In fact, the majority of the puzzles in the 2 chapters are based on grabbing one point, meandering around some pylons, and then grabbing a second point. It's a simple but competent puzzle, a nice little brain teasers for the players to unwind with after facing the horrors within the factory. But that's the out-of-universe reason as to why this exists. My question is, did they do this in the factory while it was still functional? Were their employees having to don this goofy backpack and meander around these pylons in order to make things function? Were there no normal methods of handling getting power from one point to another? Consider the warehouse area. If you want to pick up one of these objects, you need to use a crane. In order to use a crane, you need to move it around physically with the grab pack over what you need it to grab. That's fine so far. But in order to get the crane to lower, you need to touch one of these green electric panels, carry the electricity over to the crane, and then the crane will go down, pick up the object, and go up for a short period of time. In which case you'll need to move the crane out of the way of wherever it was initially in order to drop the object where you want it to drop. In order to operate this thing, you need to move around the warehouse physically, interact with some electrical equipment, and do it all on a short time span. Did nobody explain to Elliot Ludwig that having a lever to move the crane around and a button to have it lower and grab something would have been way less costly and way more effective? So again I ask, was this something that people actually did in the universe of Poppy Playtime? Is this how employees moved around heavy objects like that bronze statue? Early on in the chapter, there's this huge chasm that requires you to momentarily play Tarzan and swing across it. There's a bar over it that allows you to use a grab pack to swing across the chasm. Now here's the question. Was that hole there when the factory was operational, and rather than filling it or making a walkway, they just installed the bar up there? Or was it there as a result of the downfall of the factory and later on someone decided to install a bar up there? In which case, who? If it was there before everyone died, then does that mean that there were employees swinging around over giant pits? This is right next to the main guy's office. What about this spiral staircase that you need to bypass with a bar on the roof? Nobody thought to fix a staircase, they'd rather you just swing up with a grab pack? Again, did employees do that? I can understand some goofy bullshit where the kids might be, but this is in the regular areas of the factory that the employees would have worked in. This is stuff where people did their jobs and they had to do all of this swinging and climbing and rerouting stuff with these goofy, bright colored hands. I understand why it's in the game. It's a fucking video game, and they want to have some parkour and puzzles in between the spooks and scares seen throughout. It's a fun bit of interactivity for the player and unique gimmick that sets it apart from other horror games. But from an in-universe perspective, within the world of the game, it seems kind of weird that so much would be tied to this goofy, inefficient tool. Now, this doesn't really matter for Poppy Playtime. It doesn't advertise itself as being a cohesive lived-in world, even though it does have a rather deep and intricate lore on its own. Scorn does, however, and so it's interesting to see how they incorporate the video gamey elements of it into the general lore of its universe. Now, Scorn has its own grab pack, the wrist key. It's used to operate and interact with a lot of the standard consoles seen throughout the game. When he gets a wrist key, you can almost hear and see another one slide into place after a few seconds, which makes sense because there's multiple of these consoles, meaning multiple Scorn people will need the wrist key in order to use them. It's a small detail, but it really helps a world tie together. Similarly, when he gets the piston, it comes out of the ground and you can see there's multiple slots for multiple pistons. Again, it makes sense because more than one Scorn person would be using them to operate the various gates and machineries within the factory. I do find it kind of amusing that both games take place in factory areas with complete disregard for worker safety. In any case, this is just something I'll be thinking about when playing the game, and it probably helps that Scorn takes place in an alien planet with a completely different culture and species and history than our own. So they probably could get away with some of the more video gamey stuff and just say, no dude, that's totally how it is in their world, as opposed to Poppy Playtime, which presumably takes place on Earth with a history as close to our own as possible. Despite the discrepancies in how lore and environmental details are handled, I will say, however, that if I had to choose between using the grab pack and the wrist key, yeah, I'll use the grab pack. The wrist key looks like it fucking sucks. Sign me up for Playtime Co. and not whatever the factory area in Scorn would be called. Jokes aside, there's one more thing to get to. Understandably, a lot of people are wondering if the game will actually release this year. After all, not only has it been delayed several times, by entire years, but other games such as Starfield have been hit with a delay as well. In fact, it seems almost impossible for any video game company to release a game when they initially say it'll come out. Stop announcing games years before they're finished. Now, Megna, the PR guy, has insisted over and over again that they are on track for October. And the game director, Peklar, in this update and others, has also said that they are on track for October. But, understandably, talk is cheap. So, is there any good evidence that the game will actually come out this year? And I think there is, and it's kind of surprising that they haven't talked about this in the update. Scorn is getting an art book, which isn't surprising for such a art-heavy game, but you'll notice that it is slated to release December 6, 2022. Art books tend to come out a few months after the game's release, and if they are committed to putting this together now, it does indicate that they are indeed close to finishing the game and will be able to release it. After all, art books seem like the kind of thing to do as an afterthought of game development. I think the thing that interests me most is the insight that the artists and developers will be adding alongside what's presented in the book visually. It is a question of mine as to why they decide to make things the way they did, what inspired them, what was going on through their heads. Presumably, this is also what the Kickstarter backers will get if they pledged a high enough tier, either just the digital version or the physical version as well. One of the more exciting things about it, however, is the fact that we might actually get some proper names for the things, characters, creatures, and places seen throughout the game. At least in a way that doesn't require me to use UModel Viewer and scour through the game's code. Whether that information has any lore implications, or if it's just useful at making talking about this stuff easier, is yet to be seen. For example, I don't know if bear and kiwi are names that have significance in the Scorn world, or if it's just the names they slapped onto these creatures because, well, I can understand the kiwi, I genuinely don't get the bear. In any case, that's all I have to say for this. I hope you enjoyed the video, that it gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care. Oh shit, dude, the toys have gone out. They're killing and raping everyone, including the children. We need to open one of the gates and make our quick getaway. On it, boss.